You're tuned into a new episode, and I am one of your hosts, Sharmin Prince, and with me, the second host, Cheryl Pankhurst, is also here with me and a guest who you will hear about later. But before we continue, we will go into our 1 minute grounding session. And over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Sharmin, and welcome, Natalia. And so
Thank
we
you.
begin every episode with just a quick grounding so that we can appreciate and have some intentional time together. We just close our eyes, just kind of feel the air on our skin, feel support in our chair or our car or our bed, wherever you're listening, and just letting go of the to-do list and what didn't get done list. And you've chosen to sit with us or listen with us, and we would just love this to be very intentional so we can really share our time together. And we're very grateful you're here. And just take a deep breath and let it all go. And welcome back.
Thank you, Cheryl. I am honored and counted a privilege to introduce to you someone that I've known. I think I met her 3 years ago, Natalia Blagoeva, who lives in Zurich, Switzerland. She is an MBA and a Master of Science, a systematic coach, a certified consultant in leadership and culture, learning and development, and a family and systemic
constellator.
Julie is going to take that out. She is a systemic constellator. She has lived and worked in 5 countries, which includes 20 years of experience as an international C-level executive and over 10 years as a management consultant, a life coach, and a trusted partner of Changemakers. Today, the core focus of Natalia is on supporting humans to not just remain relevant, but to thrive in an era dominated by AI and machines by accessing and mastering key competencies with which we humans outperform the machines. She calls that the human advantage. Natalia does this using the power and wisdom of family and systemic constellations and other systemic approaches. Ultimately, this is about learning what intuition is and how to foster it, what consciousness, love, joy, and beauty have to do with it, how creation happens, what is a human and moral agency, where inspiration and wisdom come from, and how to tap into them, how to open to the mystery and magic in life, and how to provoke positive change. Natalia is also a co-founder and a co-host of the Vanilla Weeds podcast, which focus on the art of living together. She's also a co-founder and master change whisperer for the Change Whisperer Learning Journeys and the founder of a global online community called Heart to Heart Online. And that's where I met Natalia. What an impressive bio. Natalia, welcome to the Transforming Lives podcast panel. And you are so welcome. What was missing from that bio? Is there anything else that Natalia does?
Wow, what's missing from that bio is the real life behind behind all that story, because that's just like a summary of, I don't know, a few key points in terms of what inspires me today, what motivates me. But behind that, it's like in every other life, there's a period of growth, making mistakes, failing, standing up, learning on the go. So to me, that's kind of there's a depth to that process. And very often our own mistakes and our own, the things which challenge us, the things that irritate us, it's actually maybe even our sicknesses, not maybe, our sicknesses, everything at the end adds up to this beautiful texture of who we become and the unique way in which we contribute into the world. So there's lots of small and big details in that journey that actually make up who I am today and what I do. And they're all missing in that picture.
Thank you, Natalia. Natalia, there's a part of your bio that I want you to touch on, if it's possible, where you spoke about human advantage and tapping into intuition. That is, I think that is so genius in the time that we are living, where we are becoming dependent on artificial intelligence, and you are teaching us or forcing us to look within. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yes, absolutely. So the story of how humans, like the story of humans versus machines is nothing new. I remember I actually have finished automatics and robots and things like that. Like this is many years ago. I'm actually an engineer. I worked very little as an engineer, and then I moved to other areas. But I remember even at that time, many, many years ago now, when I was studying automation, I would have friends and robots in general. We were working with such things already. Many people would be afraid of it. So what happens when the robots become better than us and overtake humanity? So this has been a topic that's explored a lot in years behind, but it has become especially important today when artificial intelligence is entering every single aspect of our lives, when machines are exchanging a lot of the jobs. And actually, I think there's, like, for example, in Zurich, almost every shop now has, like grocery shops, they have self-checkout. And so they're gradually training us to do things by ourselves. So a lot of jobs will be removed. So naturally in society, you can feel a fear of what's happening in terms of losing jobs and in general being irrelevant. I see a lot of people writing about genuinely being afraid, like thinking that the machines will outperform us. And when ChatGPT first came, I got intrigued by all the fear that was going on. And I asked ChatGPT, what are the 10 ways in which humans are better than machines or outperform machines? And it came up with this extensive list, which included consciousness, intuition, creativity, moral agency. I can't remember, it was a whole sheet of things. And at first I was like happy, like, okay, see, even, I mean, jokingly, of course, everything that's in the artificial intelligence is programmed by people. It takes it out of information which is out there in the human world. But I anyway got in first moment, I was like, see, I mean, there's so much we're different. But then I looked at that list and I got scared actually, because that list one by one represented things we are denying, we sometimes like are not aware of them. I'm talking on general, like I'm not, obviously it's not true for every single person, but on average, humanity still doesn't have very clear idea what consciousness is, where intuition comes from. And when you start looking at that list, it's everything which we don't learn in school. It's everything that we don't formally focus on. So the things that the whole education system focuses on, and then the traditional things which make up how we build up an expertise to make a career. Like many people are actually focused on acquiring knowledge and expertise, which actually it's true that ChatGPT, not just ChatGPT, but AI is better than us. So AI would always be able to deal better with big amounts of data, analyze it, and come up with conclusions that potentially could be better than us humans. So for example, they are using it for diagnostic, as far as I know, pretty intensely, and they're proving over and over that AI can be trained to better read data from laboratory results, for example, because it can combine billions. I mean, if it's fed data from maybe not billions, but millions of lab tests, it can see things or reach conclusions that we cannot. So at some point, I realized how much we neglect the very things that make us human. In real life, if you talk to very experienced leaders, very successful leaders, or you talk to artists, or basically in every area, like people who have really succeeded, they would often tell you that they count on intuition. They would tell you about the importance of spirituality. At the same time, what we study, what we focus on, is more data-driven decision making. Like organizations rarely rely on intuition. They're afraid to rely on intuition. They want some proof. I've been in situations in my corporate career where I see something is wrong, for example, with a specific person. There's something, I don't trust that person, something is wrong. And I speak with my partner and manager, but I don't have data, right? And so in many cases, that was, or one specific case I'm thinking, it was, they told me, oh, you're jealous, oh, you're afraid of competition and things like that. And he turned, in one of these cases, the person turned to be a crook. But it took us, I mean, he did some damage until we really understood what's happening. And I've had several examples like that, where we, just in my own life, how we don't trust intuition. And the reason we don't trust it is because we do not understand. We don't have a common understanding of where it's coming from. And I personally went on an exploration in that area in, I think it's now 6 years, with my work with constellations, which are basically a way of tapping into the field of collective, we can call it wisdom, from where we get information. This is the same field that feeds our intuition. But the methodology I'm using actually allows us to, instead of just wait for intuition to come, to create the conditions to connect to this intuitive knowing. And it's not the only methodology, there are others as well. There is more and more research also, and scientific research in fields related to consciousness and intuition. But overall, it's very new for humanity. It's not something, I mean, it wasn't until recently that this would not be touched by scientists. So the bottom line for me is that we have been looking at ourselves as machines. We have been treating ourselves as machines, not recognizing these aspects of what it means to be fully human. I don't know, do you relate to that? Or am I drawing a darker picture?
I do. There's so much in what you just said, and it takes me right to the beginning where we're implementing self-checkout and we're removing jobs. And what sits with me there is in your description that ChatGPT gave you is connection. We're all just craving connection, and it doesn't have to be connecting with your family or connecting with your best friend. It's when you go to Walmart or where you go to the grocery store and you interact with the people behind the counter who have a nice day. Like those things I think we're desperately missing, and especially after the pandemic I think it became very obvious, and yet here we are. And what is that? Like I know, and we're replacing jobs, and I also think we're replacing physical jobs, but somebody has to run these computers. Somebody has to run these machines. I'm assuming it takes one person for every 10 that we would be replacing, sort of thing. I don't have the scientific data on that. But what do we do with this, Natalia? What do we do with this? We need connection. ChatGPT is telling us that, which I think is just so amazing that you Googled that or that you asked that. And so what do we do with this? Like, and like, I want to start there. I want to go into intuition and I want to go to everything else, but I just want to start there because that hit me like goosebumps when you said, this is what's happening in your country, but this is what's happening everywhere. And when we have the need, we know now for connection, what do we do with this?
Yeah, so the first thing that came to mind as you're speaking is so a lot of so actually there's several things here. First, you were talking about the jobs that are being replaced, and I agree it's probably a ratio to 1 to 10, but even worse than that is the people that are going to be left without jobs cannot ever educate themselves to do the jobs that are needed. So it's a societal issue, and I don't see any governments working on that. Maybe somewhere somebody's thinking, but altogether this is kind of neglected. And I have been through such transition because I come from a country that was a communist country. So I went through the transition from communism to capitalism, or from a planned economy to market economy. And the same thing happened then, because everything was changing so much. There was a whole generation of everybody who was above 45, somewhere 50, couldn't really make the transition. And there was a whole generation of taxi drivers and cleaning ladies with university educations and top qualifications. There were professors running taxis. And this is something that, it's a whole generation that suffers, and something like this is happening and will be happening now. And I don't think anybody's thinking about that in the way that it needs to be thought about. So that's one issue. The other thing you were talking about, connection, is, so on one side, we understand the need of connection. So there's a lot of people who talked about it. We understood what happened during COVID. But on the other side, the people who are driving technology don't care about that. And there is a book by, I don't remember now the name of the person, but there's a book by one guy who comes from tech. And he said, I think it was called Techie and Fuzzy, the book. And the whole book explains how we cannot leave just to the engineers of totally driving these processes, because there are a lot of social changes and social issues around that. So we need social sciences together with arts, all the creativity, working together with the tech people if we want to create something meaningful. And that's something, I mean, this book is now probably 5 to 10 years old, I'm not sure, but I don't see that happening enough either. And finally, I want to say also with regard to the artificial intelligence and all this technology, one of the social problems also is driven by the fact, and this is where, so I feel we're afraid of the wrong things and not looking at the right things. And for me, the right things is what is happening with these people. And second, how is society being changed by the fact that all this power is in 10, 50, I don't know how many corporations. I mean, there's a concentration of power in terms of this new technology, but it's in private hands and it's completely not regulated. And on top of it, it cannot be regulated by one country, because many of these companies, organizations, they're worldwide. So if you do it in one country and there's something they don't like, they're going to move in another country. They're totally mobile in that sense. So I don't see the processes in place in society to actually start addressing these issues. And for me, this is a very dangerous aspect. At the same time, there are things that, so this sounded maybe a bit dark at the same time, and where my work is focused also, is there are things we can do as individuals to embrace the changes and make sure we tap into all these things that machines will never be able to do, but we unleash them in ourselves. Because in many people, they're very suppressed. So we have valued for years rationality over intuition, for example, materialistic pursuit instead of spiritual understanding. And we need to start opening up to this perspective, which is the essence of being alive, of being happy, joyful, with good relationships. I mean, it's the essence of what it means to be living, basically. So we need to do our part, and then we need also to raise our voices in terms of pushing processes forward so that other people can do their part.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Natalia, you said so much. I can respond and ask question about artificial intelligence, but I will ask you, because I have been on the journey, that inner journey to find what's inside. And I think in spite of the degrees, that is the best experience I've had. So I want you to take us and our listeners on a journey of intuition. How do we do that? How do we get there? Where do we start?
We start by slowing down. So there's no way intuition will show up in the fast way we live. We need to create pockets of slowing down It's always, I mean, there's a lot of talk about mindfulness, so it's related to that. But it's creating these moments when we truly connect to ourselves, connect to nature, and connect to each other. And that's where we start. And if we are not willing to do that, we're just being machines that are trying to be more efficient. And I can tell you, we cannot outperform the efficiency of machines without these moments of stillness. So for me, this is the first most important point. The second is opening up to different cues that come from the environment and things we notice, things that it's all kinds of, sometimes it's something we notice in nature, or sometimes it's we're sitting quietly and then we're drawn to something in the room, maybe a title of a book or something. So we need to start seeing these small clues of what draws our attention and these insights that come as if out of nowhere. And if we start listening to them and paying attention, yeah, it's like magic. It's like miracles. It's like small miracles, one after the other. For example, there is one company, I forgot the name now. It's not a company, but more like a NGO. They were doing these walks, intuitive walks, I think it's called. So what they do, you have a question. So let's say there's something that's on your mind and you need an answer. It's something that in the traditional ways in which you look for answers, you cannot find it. So you can, for example, take a walk somewhere in nature or somewhere quiet, whatever actually inspires you, and take a walk and try to hold that question in your mind without thinking of anything else. But you don't do the usual way we think. So you don't think about it in the sense of trying to solve it. You just hold the question in your mind, but otherwise you focus on the environment. You just focus on, and the way it works best is you focus on the senses. What do you smell? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel on your skin, maybe? What touches you? So all these ways of sensations, but then holding that question in your mind. And the rest happens by itself. So it's a way of creating. So one of the tricks in this, so the first was slowing down and quieting the mind. The second is opening up to the signals from our body. We have been, and I am master of that. I've lived my life in total disregard with my body until a certain moment, because there's always something more important than me and my body. Pain, headache, for example, I've had many headaches, pill and continuing, right? So part of, if we want to connect to intuition, part of the process is reconnected with our body, because our body is the instrument with which we connect to this field of information and collective wisdom that exists, and our body is the instrument. That's what we have. So connecting to our senses is key in the process. Quieting the mind also is key. So I often joke it's about dethroning our mind for a little bit and instead connecting to our heart, connecting to the whisper. I call it the whispers of our heart. There are also other ways. So for example, one very simple way is, let's say you want to make a choice. And let's say you have 3 scenarios and you're trying to choose between them. So something you can do is write on a piece of like like a normal piece of paper actually. And you write on one side the first choice, on another piece of paper the second, on the third piece of paper the third choice. And you mix up so that you don't know which one is which. You turn them upside down so that you don't see them. And you place them on the floor. It's good to do some meditation before that, just as we started this podcast, so that you connect to, you kind of get away from the busyness and all the worries and everything else. So it's good to do some meditation, then place them on the floor, and then step on each one. Literally step on it. And just stay there for a few moments and see how you feel. And just feel in your body what happens. And you do this on each paper. And basically what happens is, and I know it sounds, so if we focus on very rational way of doing things, this is insane. It doesn't make sense. But it actually works. It works only if you are, however, willing to. So if you're thinking all the time, oh, this crap, it's total stupidity, but I'm gonna do it because, okay, let me see. I knew this lady is talking stupidity. So if our mind is full of that, it's not gonna work. But if we manage to quiet our mind, and don't ask me to explain it how it happens because I can, but it happens. We connect to the energy of that choice, and we can feel. So I've had cases on one of the piece of the paper, I have the feeling I'm gonna fall. It just kind of, so I'm not stable. On another one, my heart beats and it feels exciting, and it's amazing how it works. So this is the most simple tools I can give. Then there are more complicated things, not complicated, but a more in-depth process that happens with a constellator, which is what I do. The way that works is basically you think of a problem, and together with the constellator, you define the elements around that problem. So there are maybe a few people involved, maybe there's some other elements, and you do a physical representation. You can do it with physical figures, or it can be done virtually on a board. You do physical representation of these elements. And as you do that, certain information starts coming up about the relationship between these elements. And basically you get insights that otherwise you wouldn't get. The same insights would come sometimes as intuition. We all have it. We just sometimes wake up in the morning and there's this feeling, this is what I should do, right? Like we're thinking, forget everything else. This is what I'm doing. So it's the same here. It's we connect to this field of deeper knowing, and it like the trick here also is to be open to what is trying to it's coming up or showing to yourself. Do not to be judgmental, and also not to be placing too many expectations, because it's not about what you want to happen. It's about the information that comes to you, and then whatever comes, then you see what you do with it. But it doesn't work like, okay, now we're gonna have plan it like this and this is gonna happen. It doesn't work like that. It's more like a magic. And I hope that answered the question.
It did. And when you mention the walk in nature, I think I shared it on a previous podcast when I was involved in a moral injury study, and a former monk taught us mindfulness walking, where we quiet the mind and but we didn't think about one particular idea or thought. It's just being present with the walk. And I have never experienced anything before or after that. So when you're describing that, I'm like, that's like mindfulness walking. I wonder if I can do that again, because it was a group of us, and of course it was guided prior. And so I like that. And I like that you have mentioned connecting with self, connecting with nature, and opening to self. Because of my experience, Natalia, it's for most persons, it's the most difficult task. And is there any information, any consolation you can give to a listener who is saying, that's difficult, Natalia? How can I don't know how to slow down. I don't know how to get quiet with myself. How do I do that?
Okay, so I agree. It's not an easy process. It's actually a lifelong journey. It never finishes. We're never done. Now, first of all, on the question of, oh, I don't have time, I don't know how to do it. For me, I don't have time is a limiting belief. It's about what is the right question is, what is priority for me in my life now? And if that's not priority, it's not going to happen. But if it's a priority, you can find 5 minutes to be quiet. You can find 15 minutes to walk in a park. I mean, you don't need to go all the way to the Himalayas. I mean, you can find these small moments, maybe a little less on social media, a little less on TV, for example. If you have long commute, I mean, unless you're driving, of course, that's different. But if you're in a train or something, you can do it while traveling. I know in the States it's mainly driving, but it's not, I don't recommend it. We need to be present driving, but we can find the time. That's not the problem. It's do we want to find it? That's one thing. The second thing I'm gonna say is, if we're not willing to walk that journey of finding who we truly are and what's true for us and what's right for us, then all we're doing is we're sleepwalking through life. We're like puppets being pulled by invisible hands. And we keep recreating trauma we've been through and negative emotions we've been through. So we keep recreating that in our life, and we keep living the life according to other people's rules. So if we want that, great, we can continue doing it. So for me, it's like sleepwalking for life. But if we want to step into the driving seat and to be the driver of our lives, then we need to start paying attention to these things. And then we need to, so a few things that have helped me. So one of the things that has been very transformational is looking in what triggers me. Like the cases when I say, oh, I can't stand these people. I mean, I don't say it anymore, but I used to say, like, I can't stand this person. Like he's doing this and that. So things that really trigger us, or situations, something happens and we act as if pulled by invisible hands and we cannot control it. So these are the things where something is activated in us. So it's a signal we need to do something about us, because normally we shouldn't be activated. Doesn't matter who tells us and what happens. We need to be able to process it, to think, okay, that's another person, that's his opinion or her opinion, and we should be able to normally react to it. The moment we are triggered, it means there's something we need to work on. So that's been one signal for me that's amazing. And it keeps happening. I mean, I dealt with some triggers, others are continuing. It's a continuous process. The benefit of doing it, so if somebody thinks they cannot find time to do it, they cannot, I don't know, we have more important things, I would say the benefit is you get to be more joyful. You get to live life with easiness and joy. The more you get rid of these things, the more easy it gets and more joyful. And for me, that's a big reward. I mean, it's a huge one. So that's one thing. The other thing I find extremely useful is to be in touch with what inspires us. We are too much focused on what other people think we should be doing with our lives, and we're living a whole life according to some prescribed careers and what society thinks is important. And when we start paying attention to what inspires us, we're actually following our heart and our soul's journey. And life again gets more beautiful, more easy, and more joyful. And it's surprising how few people follow that. How few people actually really follow why what inspires them. And I can give. We were speaking in the beginning about graphic design, and I mentioned that I'm really fascinated with visuals and design. I used to. So, for example, if I have to do a PowerPoint, sometimes I spend too much time on the design and waste time that nobody is paying me for. And I used to be really mad at myself. So I'm not being efficient. So why am I spending this time? I could be doing another client now. I could be doing this. So it's not how it's done. So I used to, what's the word? Like be mad at myself for doing that. Today, I realize it gives me joy. So I'm going to spend some time, organize my PowerPoint so that it feels nice to me. And then, I mean, I don't need to over waste time, but if you recognize that it's important to you, then it puts me in a state in which I can then do whatever I'm doing with much more joy. And it's going to be more, not just, I was going to say real, but it's not just real, but more meaningful, more. It's actually when you pay. So, for example, in my case, when I take care of the design, then my thought process, everything starts flowing differently. So it doesn't have to be design, it can be something else. So we're all inspired by different things. But by paying attention to them, we tune into the life that's ours, into the things that give us joy, into what we want to do. And that's a much more beautiful, joyous, and prosperous life.
Oh my goodness. You say so much. It's like we need 12 episodes. I just want to go backwards a little bit before I go forward. And that is when you talk about how people, and Sharmin asked this question about, how people actually get in touch with that, and how do we slow down, and how do we reconnect with ourselves. And I know we talked about priority and time, but what also sits with me is I think there's people who don't actually do this process because they're scared of the answer. Because the answer means big change or big conversations or big transitions. And so how many people kind of put that in a box over here and it sits with you? I've done it. I've been through it. So I'm wondering, is there a way for a listener to recognize that maybe it's fear. And what's the next step of it if we're knowing it's free, if it's fear?
Well, first of all, fear is a huge, huge, huge factor. By the way, I'm in a process really in the beginning of writing a book, and the title of the book, I know the title of the book, but I have written very little. I know what I want to write about. I just have to find the time to really sit and put it on paper. But the title of the book is From Scared to Sacred. Because this is for me the bottom line of a lot of things we're going through. It's like dealing with the fears that are stopping us from fully living our life in a sacred way. And when I say sacred, I mean it in the most, so not the narrow spiritual concept, but in a more wider, the wider meaning of the word. So fear is absolutely a huge factor, and fear. Fear has a lot of aspects. So there are first things that have happened to us that have pushed us into certain fears, or there are things we've missed in life which have led us to fears. That's, by the way, is part of the work I do with systemic constellation, is looking into especially with family constellations, we look into things related to family structures and family relationship. There are often things from our ancestry or our family that we carry, and they're on a subconscious level. They're not even things we remember or know of, which impact us greatly. So one of the reasons I'm fascinated with method is because it taps into these unconscious things that otherwise we will never touch. So that's one way of dealing with them. Another aspect of fears is related to fears which society, broadly put, society instills in us. And it starts with, I don't know, like watching TV, for example, news. It's like one bad thing after another. Like it's so depressing. So if we, and in my life experience, fear through media, through power structures, through it comes both. So sometimes it's on purpose. We're on purpose put into fear because then we are easier to manage. And we need to become aware of it. We need to become aware that we need to create a safe, kind of a safety space for us. I'm going to get to that in a second. So basically, I guess because it's a big subject, what I'm trying to say is we need to start identifying the fears and where they're coming from. And we can say, okay, this is coming from because this happened to me. And when I did that, this happened and so on. This, I have no idea where it's coming from. This, maybe it's coming from too much television, so I should reduce watching news, for example. So we need to try to identify them. And they will be part of the fears that we cannot alone deal with. So part of them we can alone deal with, and part of them we need somebody to help us. It's not possible, some of them, to we can do a lot of work alone, but there are some aspects that are difficult. But we basically, my bottom line with fears is we owe it to ourselves to become aware of how we make decisions. And there is one tool called, it's kind of they call it the line. So they draw a line and say, this is the only tool you ever need in life to be successful. It's just this line. So at any given moment in life, we're either below the line or above the line. Below the line, we are in fear, we're judgmental, we are blaming, we are, I mean, it's all similar aspects. So it's blaming, judgment, fear. uh, we're not ready to learn. We don't want change also. Above the line, we're open. We are creative. We are the right words are not coming to mind, but we're really open to life and to whatever it brings. So at any given moment, we're either below. Above is also about creativity, curiosity, courage, compassion. So all we need to do in any given moment is to say, okay, am I acting now from below the line or above the line? Am I acting because I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job? Or am I being truthful to what I really believe? For example, am I right now afraid? For example, one example I give to people is when the first lockdown came, 99% of the world population was scared, me including. So we were watching the TV, we were totally scared. All we could think of, so the majority of people were buying enough toilet paper and enough cans, right? That's what happened. Enough cans, that's what we are doing. And there's this small percentage of population, because I teach business and economics, so this is an example for business, but it's related. There's a small percent of the population that looked at this as an opportunity to do business, and they focused on online, delivering food online, producing masks, producing food for cleaning, right? So there were a few people that at this moment were above the line, very few, and they focused on making money, right? So it's just an example of above the line and below the line thinking. So this is something simple we can do, and I'm not saying we can always immediately jump above the line, but it starts with becoming aware and being honest about what is the place out of which we're taking a decision now, what is the place out of which we're acting. And okay, sometimes we admit I was just scared and I did it, but the moment we admit it, something changes in us, and next time it would be different. So this admission of what is critical. It initiates change, while denying of what is and living in self-lies and self-deception keeps the status quo. So otherwise, fear is a huge subject, but this is my simple kind of tool that can help.
You distilled it down to such an understandable and applicable that I don't think I've ever heard in in a very long time or ever. So thank you for that. That I want to live above the line, but I love that you need to be aware and think, like, really notice, where am I behaving right now? Where's my reaction coming from? That's so important. Thank you. That's like a mic drop for me.
You're welcome. This is from a book. It's called 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, that I recommend, of the consciousness group. I think the line is something they picked it up from somewhere, but this is where I picked it up from. And there are these 15 commitments of conscious leadership, but they are, I would say, there are 15 commitments of conscious living. So they're not just about leadership. That's the other thing, by the way, the word leadership. It's been used left and right. And for me, the most important leadership is self-leadership. It's our ability to actually be the leader of ourselves. And everything else is just related to that. And if we're talking about organizational leadership and organizational leader, for me, the most important thing they need to learn is followership. But that's a whole other story. Otherwise, self-leadership is step one and it's critical.
Natalia, I mean, I've written so many notes. There were so many moments of dropping the mic. When the way you're encouraging, inspiring, motivating us to become self-aware, to become present, to know who you are, it's so inspiring. And then you added the topping of self-leadership. I mean, this is so phenomenal, and I really think that the world needs this at this moment. I needed to hear that today, and I'm sure I'm speaking for Cheryl, and I'm sure I'm speaking for many of the listeners that this is in need. When you mentioned the line, it took me back to a tool that I use called life mapping, where when you above the line is the good things that happen in your life, and below the line is like your traumas. And you have touched on so many elements. I can go on and on and on and on. You're fantastic. Cheryl, over to you, because I'll just continue to shower Natalia with flowers.
Oh, and I'm the same. I have notes and notes and scribbles and scribbles. More notes, I think, than I've ever taken. And it's because, sometimes we listen to, motivators and intuitionists, and it doesn't always apply. Like, here's the message, and here's the listener, or here's me, and there's no integration. And I feel like what you offered in just this hour has given me the opportunity to integrate what you're actually talking about, because it makes so much sense to me, as I'm sure it makes so much sense to people listening. I would honestly offer, we would love to do another episode, because I think there's, we have to be mindful of time, but there's still like so many things, so many rabbit holes I want to go down with this conversation. I hope
total pleasure. It's total pleasure. And thank you so much, both of you. I mean, I'm so happy it resonates. What I'm speaking resonates with you. And I relate to what you're saying, because it took me years of integration myself. A lot of things that, like, moving from different levels of knowing. So at some point I knew certain thing is important, but to get from there to really, what are the small steps we can take in that direction? That took me a lot of time to integrate, both on personal level, but also as someone who is trying to help others, basically. And by the way, on that journey of trying to help others, it's been a very interesting transition. So after I left my corporate job, I went into this consulting, training, coaching area. But it's very interesting. I started as a management consultant, so I even took a certification for certified management consultant. Then I got disappointed of that, got more into, so it was management consulting / mentoring, which today I translate into telling people what to do. so meaning you come up with these models, and you're supposed to wow them, and then they do what you tell them. I'm a bit brutal, like simplifying it, but because I want to explain a point. So I moved from that point. I moved more towards coaching and facilitation, because I realized that it's more about creating a space in which people find their own truths. Mm. And I want to bring here, my focus was culture, leadership, self-development, things like that. And in that area, I felt it's really not about giving people models and telling people what to do. It's more about creating the space in which they find their own truths and their own journeys. And then from that, I moved to this systemic constellations, which is even it's you're even more outside of the process. You're really living it to some higher power, actually, and finding insights and trusting the process somehow. So it's been a process of pulling myself out. So helping by pulling myself further and further out, but then creating the moment for people in which they can find their own truth. So it's been an interesting journey from thinking I know what right is to a place where I don't know what's right for people. I just try to create conditions in which they find their own truth journey, whatever it is.
Thank you for sharing that, because while Cheryl was speaking, I said I have to say this. We can resonate with what you're saying, and what you're saying is so impactful, and one can integrate it immediately because it's a journey that you have taken. You're not just telling us about something you read. It's your journey. And then right after, you started to let us know about the different journeys you have taken and brought you to this place of there is a sense of purity, a light, a level of spirituality that projects from your words. And it's not just from your words, it comes from the gut, from understanding who you are. So, my God, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing not just knowledge, but part of your intuition and your spirit. That's what I felt. And I hope that the listeners can connect with that, and they will receive what we have been able to experience, and is taken and integrate and is taken with us after this podcast ends.
Thank you, Sharmin. It's amazing what you said, and thank you. And yeah, it just humbles me to hear that. But I'm really happy that that what I'm saying is meaningful. Basically, that I'm touching. But I'm touching you. It's what we live for, right? It's this interaction with others and touching each other's lives. And
yes, connection.
Connection. So it's a real honor to be here with you, and to thank you so much for your words. I mean, it means a lot to me.
Natalia, before we wrap up, can you please tell our listeners where to find you, how to connect with you? We'll put everything in the show notes, but I want to hear from you where we can find you, because your warmth and it comes out from inside, and I just want to hear you talk a little more. So where can we find you?
So first of all, I have a website which is with my name, Natalia Blagoeva is one word, .com. You can find me basically on all the usual platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I mean, I don't use all of them, but you can find me and write me, and I'm gonna get the message. I'm also so there is a community, Heart to Heart Online. There are a few things happening there, so that's a place also one can find me. But the easiest way is from my website, and then there's a contact form, and yeah, that's the easiest, I would say.
Well, thank you. Go ahead, Sharmin, sorry.
I have to ask about the systemic constellation. Where do we connect with you to sit with you for systemic constellation?
Yes, thank you for that question. So basically, I do one-on-one constellations, which is working with individual problems, and I can be contacted from my website. This year, I have been doing also societal systemic constellations, which have been looking into societal issues, and they're happening in a place on the Heart to Heart online platform, which is called Heart Whispers Circle of Trust. Now, for next year, I'm redesigning things. So basically, what I would be doing next year is very soon. From next year, I would be creating groups to work on specific problems. So for example, some will be around health issues and well-being in general, others around some family stuff. So I have this series, actually, it's called Awake. So the first A is ancestry, W is well-being, A is abundance, K is Kama Mudra, which is a very interesting word, and so awake and emergence. So these are different groups that I would be forming. So it would be like 4 or 5 people committing to several sessions where we work on. So every time there's work that's done on a specific question of one person, but the other people participate as well. So there is there's a lot of benefit of also participating in systemic constellation as somebody working on the issue of somebody else, so not only on your issues. And this information will be becoming available in the Heart to Heart online community as well as on my website.
Well, thank you once again, Natalia. It has been an absolute pleasure and an honor, and I feel like I just need to get off here and sit with myself and really absorb everything that you've said. Has been so important. We thank you again. We thank you, listeners, for stopping by and enjoying this Transforming Lives podcast panel episode. And we will see you again next week.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor, and thank you both for creating the space where I feel at home and I can share from the heart. Thank you so much.